There's a reason why most people never become known for their thought leadership. It's not because they lack ideas, but because they haven't done the work to build their credibility or subject matter expertise. Today's guest is Simone Heng, a human connection specialist and award-winning author. Her book, Let's Talk About Loneliness, has received 6 international accolades. Simone's mission is to inspire deeper connection in a world that is increasingly disconnected. She's also spoken to thousands at Harvard, Google, Meta, United Nations, and her work has been featured by CNN, Al Jazeera, Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and BBC Radio. Simone built her career in thought leadership not through shortcuts, but through years of intentional work, from educating herself to building a credible brand, and also publishing ideas that are not only polished, but profound. In this episode, we talk about what it really takes to become a thought leader. You'll hear about how Simone's career wasn't built on quick wins, but rather it was shaped by vision, discipline, and a deep respect for her craft. So, if you've ever wondered what it looks like to play the long game in a world that rewards speed, this is the conversation. Let's dive in. Every Edit's History interview runs about 60 minutes, but only 2/3 make it into the final cut. The rest, the 33% that I left behind, lives in my newsletter, Annotations. This newsletter is where I share the edits that got cut and also the strategies, the insights, and step-by-step tactics that emerged after the mic is turned off. Think of it as your companion guide to the episode. Richer, deeper, and more actionable. You can subscribe at CherylLao.com/email. Again, the link is CherylLao.com/email. Simone, you have been told I have never seen an Asian woman speak like this, and that might be a reason why you stand out. I'm so curious to know, how did that comment land for you when you first heard it?
It wasn't directly to me. So it was a leader saying it to the event team, and then the event team fed it back to me. I don't know. I think it was last year that it happened. I don't think it's going to be that way for much longer. It depends how this whole anti-diversity political movement that's going now, this return to conservatism, if that happens, then maybe for a while it's still going to be me, but I hope it won't be. I hope there's going to be loads and loads of women and Asian women speaking, with a level of aptitude that blows people away. That's the hope, right?
And the word aptitude, I think, really encapsulates how I perceive you, because I think, as someone who is of Asian descent as well, I didn't grow up with many external examples of really skillful, eloquent speakers who look like myself. And so I think maybe where I want to first start this conversation is, how did you even start developing your voice as a thought leader? Because there was one thing you said on an interview with Lisa Hugo on her podcast. You said it's not about your story, it's not about your personality, because everyone would say like, "Oh, Simone, you're charismatic," but then you would say that everyone in media is charismatic, but rather your currency is your thoughts. That was something that you said in that interview. And that the element of thought in thought leader, you cannot emphasize that enough. So I'm curious about, how did you even develop your subject matter expertise in human connection?
Yeah, I think what people don't get from me before they hear me speak, like if they were just to look at a still photo, is how much of a geek I am. Like, I'm a massive nerd. And I can study for hours to the point that I have no body left. Like, I forget that I have a body, which is not a good thing. And so particularly when it came to the person who made that comment to me, and they were like, "Oh, it's because your story, it's because of your charisma." And I think here is where we get a huge issue online with people wanting to have the careers that other people have, and they don't understand there's an internal strategy. They're making assumptions based on the final result, but there is just so much that goes behind finding your niche topic, building on that niche topic, and then hopefully you have love and devotion to that niche topic. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm 6 years in, and there are fluctuations in what the market wants, what the speaking trends are, and you have to be in it for the long haul with what you choose. It can't be a fair weather relationship with it. So that's one of the things that I really thought about when a mentor said to me, I think human connection is your thing. When you walk into a room, how many people know of you, know about you. And I never thought I was a very good human connector at that time, not 7, 8 years ago. I had so much trauma. I think I'm far better now, but I don't think that I'm perfect at it. I think I know a lot about it, which makes me much more intentional with it than when I didn't know about it. I really don't waste my time anymore in terms of where I spend my connection time. So that's one of the things. So yeah, I had a mentor, and then I also had a few different things happen in my life. So my mum was having issues connecting with her own memories. She has a degenerative disease. So when we can't connect with our own idea of self, we can't really connect well with others. So that was one of the things. And then I was working at a radio station here in Singapore. That was extremely toxic environment. And I've worked as a broadcaster all over the world. So it became very apparent to me, because it wasn't my first rodeo, that the connection or the belonging or lack thereof that happens within a team in an organization has a huge direct result on the quality of the content that comes out. So if individuals are not connected to each other or themselves, or they don't feel psychologically safe, they fail to be creative. And I thought, if this is happening at a radio station, where else is it happening? And then the final straw was one night. I was on air doing a giveaway for a superhero movie. And I said to people, if you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be and why? And a young Gen Z voice noted into the station. She said, I know it's not a really big superpower, but I really want to know how to connect with people one-on-one. And I feel everyone is kind of cold to each other nowadays. And that was the final arrow. And I was like, okay, we really need to investigate this, and we need to research this, because I think connecting with people is easy, but there's a growing generation of people that does not feel that way. And so what do I need to do to serve them and to serve others? And that's how it started.
I think what really stands out about what you just shared is because I think for a lot of folks who want to, have the career you have, be an author like you, be a speaker like you, they'll start to think about, oh, what's my specialist insight? But for you, it seems like there were a string of personal lived experiences that led you to choose this topic to go deep in on.
Yeah, there was a lot of other topics I was thinking about, because I knew I wanted to be a speaker, because I knew I could speak. But any younger, I was 35 when I started, I'm 41 now. So any younger than that, I looked about 12 years old. Nor did I think that I had the depth. I mean, you need depth. That's really important. I see a lot of stuff that is just repeating what has already been said. You have to add insight. You have to be speaking about your topic and adding value in a way that no one thought of that before. No one thought of it like that before. I think that that's really vital. So there were personal things that happened, and then obviously running with the research made me understand so much more about myself, and it kind of saved me in the pandemic. I think it's also that my kind of daring directness and authentic way of speaking, even in interviews, like when I'm off stage. No, I hadn't seen anyone speak like that when I first set out to do this. And then I think I was so disengaged with entertainment, always having to talk about fluff, that I was just like, to hell with it. And I honestly think you have to be at that to hell with it point to slowly learn to sit in your truth and speak directly from your truth. And I hope I've had a bit of a part of being the impetus for that change in our market, and making people feel that they don't have to show face and hide. Because people don't connect with you if you're hiding. They don't.
Right. And I recall now, you said that, when you were working in media, you felt like you were suppressing the natural intelligence part of you. And I think that's one thing that I am so nosy about, is when you think back to that version of you who felt like you had to suppress a lot of natural parts of you, what would you say to that Simone who were told, we don't need this part of you? What would you say to her now?
I would just say to her, your voice is already talking to you. Your voice is already observing what happens to women as they age in this industry. If they do not marry a rich Indonesian Chinese billionaire, they are out on the street. Okay. So you're not built like that. You make a contingency plan. You are observing. Stop suppressing what you're observing and spending your time being thinner, sexier, growing your hair when your hair is falling out, sis. You know, like all of these things that the industry was conditioning me um to value and to ignore those voices. Um I would just have said to her, hey, you're already intuitively knowing. Just drill deeper into that knowing because the answer is already there.
And to someone who might currently be in a position where they're afraid to show parts of them, and there is something that they want to write about, podcast about, speak about, but going back to that subject matter expertise that we were talking about earlier, and they feel like they have the lived experiences and a subject matter they care so much about, but right now they don't have a degree in it, let's say.
Yeah.
How can they start building on that? Like, what was the behind the scenes work that you've done?
Oh, I've spent, I don't know, maybe six figures on, I mean, obviously I have a degree in communications and cultural
Yes.
studies, so it's
Mm.
not dissimilar from what I speak on. That is also surprising to me that I have to remind people I have a degree because I didn't realize that in Singapore, a lot of radio DJs don't go to university. Whereas when I worked in radio around the world, people all went to university. I didn't know that that people assumed because I was a DJ that I didn't have a degree. You know, these are all the cultural things that I'm like, oh my gosh, now I've got to put this on my bio from the year 2004. Like, seriously? So, I have a degree that's related to it, but I also did authentic relating. I went to Cambridge Summer School and studied psychology. I did loads of online courses. Like, I cannot even tell you the amount of work. And then self-driven work, the way someone would study for a bachelor's. I read all the scientific papers that come out about my field. I never ever stop learning. And then, like, let's add on to that all the marketing stuff that goes into marketing your book once you've distilled all that knowledge and you put it out there, and the marketing that goes into driving a speaking business so that you can earn money from basically being a geek, right? So a geek with good makeup, like, there's effort. There's a lot of effort in that. Yeah.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is just sharing your personal experiences, your story isn't enough, but you really need a certain slant on the topic as well. Like,
I don't know anyone who has done any research into the professional speaking industry who thinks that you can build a business on telling your story. Like, it's the first thing you learn. And so that's also really surprising to me is when people just try and copy what I've done and they think that that is what's getting me booked by Fortune 500s. Like, you just can't. It's not stories. No one, unless you're Michael Jordan, it's horrible, but no one really cares about your story. But it's how you place your signature stories inside your work that adds a new lens. But essentially, everyone in this world, sad to say, is looking for what's in it for them. So I think that is the piece of the puzzle here is like, how can you add value? What have you got to offer? And if you can do that, you'll always work. It's when you forget that.
why do you think so many aspiring speakers, creators, entrepreneurs think that just your story is enough?
Because they spend too much time online, instead of reading full books. And I think when you are watching people sharing snippets of their story online, they are selling to you in some ways. So a big part of online sales is people buy from people they know, like, and trust. What is the easiest way to make a connection with people to make them trust you? It's to share your story.
Hmm.
So because they're putting those short form bits of content up online, other people are just, again, following an external strategy and not forming the proper internal strategy. And that's what will get you there to that misconception.
That makes sense. That makes sense. There, I think there is a time and place for sharing your story, but that isn't the the foundation you need to build a actual substantial speaker, author, thought leader business
Of
like
course.
yours.
I don't know anyone who has done any research that into the speaking field and thinks this. Like, it's shocking to me. But I also know that I'm one of the few people in my friends who read long form books. Like, people don't read anymore. And if you were to read a book, you'll see that really well known, respected thought leaders who are doing this at the highest level, their stories are in there, but they're used within the context of a format of how something is structured to teach something. And so if you were to go and like just read the full book, you'd know. Problem is, people also place stories on social media because they are clickable and shareable. And that doesn't mean you're getting the value. I share stories online because I like to retain the insights that I share with my clients, especially for my clients. So those parts of my speeches don't necessarily go on the internet. Um, and and anyone who would just study the business of speaking would know this. Like, this is like kind of 101 stuff. Yeah.
I want to pivot a little bit because Simone, I came from a academic research background myself, and one thing that I've always been a bit flip-flopping around is it's a topic of do you need to have a PhD or a degree of some sort to be considered a thought leader? What are your thoughts on this?
My mentor first said to me, no, you don't need, um, but I flip-flop on this. I think you need a degree. I think that at least a bachelor's, I think is good. I think there are many different thought leaders in many different fields. A lady who knows how to cook, who never got a PhD, but she's an incredible cook. She is a thought leader on culinary science. There's no doubt about it. She writes cookbooks, she has content online. We don't question her qualifications. So I don't, a lot of the credibility for my work comes because I speak well and I have like a neurodivergent memory, so I can quote all the studies from people to underpin whatever I'm telling the story. But I do think my lived experience with the death of my father and the paralysis of my mother and my childhood trauma does give a lot of credibility to um, what I speak about, because I do know some speakers in other markets that have a different slant on the topic, and I have seen them get rejected because the depth isn't there. So just because you're a good networker, or you are doing interviews with 1,000 people, and then you say you're a human connection expert, but you don't know any of the science of it, you haven't really been through the pain of loneliness, which is the antithesis of human connection, which makes for a much more well-rounded argument as to why we need human connection, because I've experienced the deficit of it. I think those things are really important, but I really do think there are no rules in the thought leadership industry, which is what makes it so difficult, I guess, for people to get it right. Because it's so free and easy and there are no rules, it can be really confusing for people. And again, I say it this way, but there is no right or wrong way to do it. We have people who say they've been monks and were never monks become best-selling authors. We have people with New York Times bestsellers who paid for that bestseller. We have people in New York Times bestsellers who plagiarized the key argument of the book. Okay, and this is all widespread and out there. So it's Wild West. There are no rules. It's only your integrity, what you are willing to do and what you are okay with, that are the rules that you live by. In like anything in life. Yeah. So what are you comfortable with, Cheryl? Do you feel you need a PhD?
The thing is, I actually quit my PhD a few years ago.
Oh,
Um, I was doing a PhD in social work,
good for you.
but but because of the pandemic, my partner and I were separated for almost 2 years. So at that point in my life, I decided to quit the PhD to move to Singapore and pursue my online coaching, consulting business and podcasting full time. But the inner academic is still well alive in me. And I always light up when I see creators and entrepreneurs who incorporate surveys and statistics in their work. When they want to make a point, they might send out thousands of surveys just to collect the information from their listeners and audience, and then disseminate the findings from their surveys with their audience. So my ears perk up and my eyes light up when I see individuals like you who have done so much intensive study, both within like institutions or within your own time, self-study, that always makes me think of how, because when I first entered the content creation space, I had the judgmental assumption of, oh, people just make things up.
People do just make things up. There are a lot of people. That's why my Instagram says demystifying human connection, because any tip I share or anything is based on research. I'm not making up
Yeah.
something.
And that's why when I see people who have done the research, have also combined that in conjunction with the lived experience, I'm like, that's the kind of thought leader I want to become, irrespective of whether I get a PhD or not in the future. I want to be someone like you who have done so much in-depth work,
Yeah.
and gone through the lived experiences on a subject matter that matters so much to you.
Well, I was going to say, Cheryl, like it doesn't mean you can't later on, after you've established yourself, go and do your PhD. Like my dream is to do a master's in creative writing. I don't have a partner. A lot of my friends who are doing it on top of their business, their partner pays the rent. And I live in the second most expensive city in the world on my own. And with a master's being, 30,000 a year on top of everything else I pay to live here, I just can't do it right now. But I will do it one day. Maybe when I'm 50, I'm going to do it. And that's what's amazing about this kind of business is you can, like, I know people who are speakers who went to get their PhD while they were actively being speakers, and they did it on something that they were studying. And I think that that's amazing. Like they did the study on something that they speak on as they were speaking on it, and they realized certain thesis questions were coming up. So it's actually a beautiful place to do it from, because you have a bit of foundation work before you go do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're in the trenches and now you're deepening the trenches even further. So when you started pursuing a thought leadership business for yourself, was there at the earlier parts of this thought leadership business, being a speaker, did you ever create content where you look back and you're like, ugh, not my best work? You kind of cringe a little bit. Like, because, as someone who follows you now in the more recent years, I only see some of your best work. But I want to know, do you ever look back and think like, oh, I shouldn't have posted that?
Yes, but when I was still a DJ and I was starting to cross over, and I hadn't found a mentor that I found who taught me. She doesn't do it anymore, unfortunately, but I got her just at the right time during the pandemic, and she taught me everything I know. Everything I know. And now I've found someone new who I just bought a course today, and I hope she's in bed, because the last one she sold a business. She doesn't do it anymore. But I didn't know how to nail the tone of voice. I didn't know how to nail what I would share, what I wouldn't share. I didn't know how to go from being that kind of look at me, I'm a personality, I am in media sort of thing, to here's how I add value, this is my brand, I'm a CEO. Okay, so that's a big, big shift. And once I found her method, everything was fine and has been fine since. But I would say around 2019, it got real messy. And it got messy because I had been at the radio, and they had controlled my Instagram. So for 4 years, I was not allowed to really be me. And so when I finally was able to be released and use my voice, it was like you've been on a diet and then you're allowed to eat whatever you want. And I just was throwing my voice around everywhere. And then it was wonderful, like having some guidelines to go by, and the science and structure of how you build an online brand was incredible. And based on what she taught me, I mean, I did multiple six figures in a pandemic immediately. And that saved me because, again, no mummy, daddy, no husband, no boyfriend, no one paying for things. Like, I could have had to go back to Australia and been deported if I didn't make money. So, honestly, if you can get it right, it's life-changing. And then again, now 6 years in, the thing that keeps me also up at night is that the algorithms have all changed and how people can see. So what worked 6 years ago, now I have to relearn. But I love learning. So for me, it's good anxiety. It's like motivational anxiety.
I think it's so interesting because for a lot of people, they feel like their gripe with social media or showing up on social media is that they have to hide certain parts of themselves. But for you, because there were literal constraints that were placed on you, when you had the freedom, it felt actually liberating.
It was liberating, but
A
then
little
it
messy.
was also like a little messy. But it was. I always tell people that last radio job and the 2.5 years I spent like planning to set up the business I do now, I was like a racehorse behind, a race before the horse race, and they're in that box and they're like hooves are like, I mean, I had so much to say, and and I planned and I researched so much. And now I'm at the point after 6 years where I've had an arc of work and we're about to have the second book, which will be the next arc of work. And I've kind of said everything I want to say. Not only did I get to say it, Cheryl, like what a blessing. It was heard. It was picked up by media outlets around. Like what I had to say actually resonated with people. I mean, and how do you replicate that? How do you have that again? And that's the sophomore slump that people talk about. Alanis Morissette has, not saying I was ever as successful as Alanis Morissette, but say you do have a really good first album. How do you create a second thing that provides as much enjoyment, value, engagement for people as the first thing you did with the new you that you now are? And that is real anxiety. That is real anxiety. And so that's what I'm currently in at the moment.
I want to talk about the book and being an author and the process of writing the book because I think having a book is what I think in my mind sets you apart because I'm sure I have never written a book and be published by Hay House, but I can only imagine the amount of thought, care, brain power, and time and just agonizing over every sentence that it must have took to produce this book. So, what are things about writing a book that people don't realize? Like, we only see the published physical hard copy book, but what are things that people don't realize about what it takes to be an author?
I think the first book process was very, very different. I did labor over everything. And what I would say to everyone is make sure your first book is the best work you can produce because you may not ever get another chance to do another one. Like publishing is cutthroat. So make it outstanding to your level, whatever your standard of outstanding is. Don't be half-assed about it in any way. Don't, I mean, a lot of people outsource it to a ghostwriter and they do all this. I don't know. For me, it was just important that it'd be a representation of what I wanted my work on all the other platforms to be. And um, I think it's hard for me to know what most people don't know about the book. I can easily tell you what most people don't know about speaking because I feel like speaking is a much more behind closed doors economy. Like it's very people hide information in the speaking industry. I'm the first one that's kind of I really share on it because I believe like we should share and we should have more Asian female speakers. So we need to share and democratize that information. But publishing, I mean, I think one of the big things that a lot of people talk about with publishing is that, oh, you don't get a good advance and people will cheat you. And I had a great advance from my publisher, and people always like, you always need to have an agent. And I didn't have an agent. I just wrote a really good book that got acquired. So I really don't think there are any rules. But I would like to say that if you want to be an author, you should know how to write. Like some
Mm,
people just cannot write. That's the truth. They cannot write. So that's
mm,
like wanting to be a TV presenter, but you can't speak on camera. And I think the biggest tip I would love to leave people with is if you want to be an author, ask yourself, why do you want to be an author? Same reason as why you want to be a speaker. If it's to just be famous and be seen, then don't do it. And if you do want to write a book, think about what value are you going to add to change the world that hasn't already been written. And for God's sake, read. Like, how do you expect to be an author if you never read a book? There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. There's people want to be speakers who never watch other people's speeches. I mean, I think when I was stuck at the radio every day around work, I would just watch people speaking online. Like, that's part of it. I still attend conferences now where I am not the speaker. So it's like, to be a good communicator, you need to listen. That's 50%, right? So I think there's such a lack of humility and so much narcissism these days that people just see the shiny person signing the book and don't understand that you only get there by doing like all the painful, ugly, hard work. You really I'm sorry, there's no way around it. There's like a lot of hard, ugly work that has to also be done.
One thing I think, as we start to near the end of our conversation for today, is there was one anecdote you shared, and it really moved me. You shared again on Lisa Hugo's podcast about how you just got off stage in Barcelona, and there was a gentleman who came up to you, and he said, Simone, I have a daughter, and if she ever was on stage and honored me the way you honored your dad through your speech, I would die a happy man. And you mentioned that, when you started being a speaker, there was so many stories that you were sharing, but you didn't realize that they would be so universal. And that vulnerability is how we really connect with so many people. And I think this particular anecdote just shows that it's kind of like a legacy and impact that we don't always plan for, but we end up creating it. And so as you move forward in 2025 and onwards, like, what kind of legacy do you want to create, and what body of work are you building to create that legacy?
I don't know. I don't think I really look at it as legacy. I look at it as creativity. If I'm not creating, Cheryl, I am very sad as a person. And so I think for me, 2025 is the pullback year. So we all need to pull the bow back in order to shoot the arrow forward. And so 2024 was a very big year where I was just reactive. I had a lot of bookings. I was just doing stuff. And this year, because of the Trump administration, definitely people have been holding budget a bit more. It's been a quieter year. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the pandemic was quiet, and I basically studied all the great things that have now made everything else happen. And so what I'm really looking forward to this year, to answer your question, is time to learn again, time to upskill, time to read all the books that have been bought in the last 2.5 years since I was writing the second book that I bought and I haven't got to read. Like, I can't wait to geek out. So that is as far as my mind about legacy goes. And I guess going into next year we'll probably have a second book launch, and I also want to expand what I'm doing in the UAE and really bring value to the Middle East and Southeast Asia in the kind of work that I do, and not abandon this part of the world to jump ship to America or the UK. I feel like we need people here building that industry here. And if I could help to do that, that would be a pretty good legacy.
Amazing. And one more final question. What does your self-curriculum, your own created curriculum look like this year? Because you mentioned you're going to read books.
This is really easy for anyone who is setting up a thought leadership business. Like, you are not a freelancer. When I first started, everyone's like, oh, you're freelancing now? No, I'm not. I have a business where I have to employ my own employment pass. I'm a PR now, and I do all these things. So I work in my business 9 to 5, literally 9 to 5 every day, like anyone else who has a job. And I fill those 9 to 5 hours. So if there isn't a podcast to do, then I am improving what I do in some other way. I'm doing a marketing course. I'm reading a study. It's 9 to 5, 5 days a week. I no longer work the weekends, which I did for the first 3 years of the business. And that's how we roll. And if you can just stick to working 9 to 5 and don't get lazy and watch Netflix and do all this other stuff, you'll have good momentum. It's
Amazing.
just work in it like you worked in your job before, except it's stuff you want to do.
Mm, mm. Amazing, amazing. Simone, where can people find you and or how can they work with you?
Sure. So I've just launched a new business called Thought Leaders Now. It's for high-level leaders who want a done-for-you service, your keynote written, your slides done, um, your positioning for your book outline, connection to a ghostwriter. And so we've just launched that. So thoughtleadersnow.com. If you're interested in becoming a speaker or a author, DM me and I'll send you the link to my 3-hour masterclass on becoming a speaker and author, which has everything in it. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, at Simone Heng.
Wonderful. Simone, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, babe.
Thank you. And to everyone else, thank you for being here as always.
Bye, gorgeous. Bye.
At one point in our conversation, Simone and I touched on whether you need a PhD or formal credentials to build thought leadership. And while much of our discussion were focused on the importance of putting in the work to build credibility and deepen your subject matter expertise, I want to close out this episode by exploring thought leadership from a slightly different lens. So here's a perspective I want us to consider. Thought leadership isn't about titles. It's not about where you went to school, the companies you worked for, or how many accolades and titles and whatnot that you've collected. It's also not about the size of your audience or whether you've gone viral or topped the podcasting charts. But rather, thought leadership is about using the thoughts already inside your head, your lived experiences, your insights, your values, and turning them into something that helps others. It's leading with your ideas to create real change. It's the decision to go first and speak up, not because you want the recognition or the clout, but because it matters to you to speak about it, right? Because thought leaders don't just conform to the dominant narratives just because they're popular or proven, but they share their ideas because they believe there's a different or a better way forward. And they choose to lead with their own thinking because of the contribution they want to make to others. And yes, it takes work, right? It takes time, discipline, and a willingness to build something that has substance and is much deeper than a curated image, right? Or an attention-grabbing soundbite. And the thing is, you don't become a thought leader just by saying that you're one or announcing yourself as one, but you become one by building, right? By consistently translating your ideas, stories, and question into a body of work that others can then engage with, learn from, and be moved by. And this kind of leadership demands that you take your work seriously, right? Don't just create content, but make an actual contribution. Don't chase short-term validation, but really focus on the long-term relevance. And I also want to say that some of the most impactful voices, they may not have come from traditional paths, right? They might have emerged without the prestige, the pedigree, or even the permission, but they've done the work, right? They've done the work to really share what matters, and that is what makes them a thought leader. Because I really don't think that we should allow narrow definitions of thought leadership to dictate who gets to be heard. If we only value people who fit a certain mold from the get-go, then we silence others who might actually offer really good insights, but only if we give them the space to share, right? And I'm not saying that credentials are irrelevant, but what I really want to say is that we need to take our growth and learning and skill development more seriously and start to seek out environments that challenge you and stretch you and sharpen your thinking and expand your capacity, rather than just waiting for permission or external validation to start sharing what you think and what matters to you. Because that is the real shift that is required for you to build thought leadership. Right? Stop obsessing over the likes or where your next client is coming from and start thinking about the long term, right? Amplify your message because it deserves to be heard and it is important for you to share it, right? Stop hiding your work from people who don't get it, but instead become the person who actually takes the lead and really own your voice fully. Because thought leadership is ultimately a journey, but it begins the moment you commit to building, and it continues every time you create something that helps people think differently, feel more deeply, or move more courageously through the world. And yes, it's kind of hard, right? I'm sure that even the boldest thought leaders wrestle with self-doubt. They worry about being misunderstood, criticized, or even ignored. But they speak up anyways because this work matters. And I know that your work, it matters too. It matters not just to you, but to the people that it will reach and impact. So let's keep going. Sounds good? Awesome. Let's get to work. If you enjoyed what you heard today, well, there's more where that came from. For each episode of Edit History, I send the bonus strategies, insights, and frameworks straight into your inbox via the Annotations newsletter. This is the companion guide to each episode, and it is designed to deepen your thinking and help you take action. Join the newsletter at CherylLao.com/email. Again, that is CherylLao.com/email.